program presenting on Bell Hooks' Teaching to Transgress Education as the Practice of Freedom. So Bell Hooks was born with the name Gloria Jean Watkins in 1952, and she grew up in the highly segregated town of Hopkinsville, Kentucky. This is where she first began to question how race and class shape access to education, especially as she was born to middle-class parents, and she lived in the rural parts of Kentucky. She earned her bachelor's degree from Stanford University in 1973, then continued on to complete a master's at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and she received her doctorate at the University of California, Santa Cruz. In 1976, Hooks began her teaching career, and she held positions at major institutions such as USC, Yale, Oberlin, and the City College of New York, and she also taught abroad. During the 80s, she adopted the name Bell Hooks in honor of her great-grandmother, Belle Blair Hooks, a woman known for her bold opinions. And she used lowercase letters. Bell Hooks used lowercase letters to emphasize that her ideas should take center stage, not her identity. Her first major book, Ain't I a Woman? Black Women and Feminism, was published in 81. And this is what established her as one of the most influential feminist thinkers of her generation. Then over the next 4 decades, Hooks wrote more than 40 books, blending theory, storytelling, and activism. She even wrote books for children. Her writing challenged institutions to see the classroom as a transformational space, one where love, dialogue, and critical thinking could become revolutionary acts. So the environment, I wanted to include a little bit of history about the place where Bell Hooks grew up and where she later was a teacher at Berea College in Kentucky. So Berea College, located in central Kentucky, has always held a special place in Appalachian and American history. It was founded in 1855 by abolitionists, and Berea was the first interracial and coeducational college in the South. It welcomed students of all races, all genders, and all classes. The vision of equality faced serious opposition, though, because in 1904, the Day Law made interracial education illegal in private schools. So Berea challenged the law all the way to the Supreme Court, but the decision was upheld in 1908. Determined to continue its mission, Berea College began paying tuition for its Black students to attend other institutions and later helped create the Lincoln Institute near Louisville, which provided vocational education for African American students. And the Day Law remained in effect just up until 2 years before Bell Hooks was born so she was born in 1952, and it was in effect until 1950. So Bell Hooks was born into a time when segregation had just been outlawed in at private colleges in Kentucky. So for the first 10 years of Bell Hooks' life, so over the next decade, Kentucky became a regional leader in civil rights reform. Louisville passed a public accommodations ordinance in 1963, and by 1964, they had authorized a commission on human rights. And then Kentucky Civil Rights Act of 1966 was officially outlawed, which officially outlawed segregation in public spaces, was put into effect. So I included this because for Hooks, growing up in this region meant living within a landscape of both oppression and resistance. And Berea's legacy of struggle and inclusion helped shape her belief that education could be a revolutionary act and a practice of freedom, which is in the title of this book. In Teaching to Transgress, Hooks credits Paulo Freire, the Brazilian educator and philosopher, as one of the most powerful influences of her thinking. And she writes that Freire Freire, gave her a language, one that she could understand how education could challenge systems of domination and awaken critical consciousness. And I have this quote here for you from 46. So when Hooks writes, we cannot enter the struggle as objects in order later to become subjects. That idea was very important for her. And it taught her that liberation requires self-awareness, that we cannot wait to be given power. We have to claim it through knowledge, reflection, and dialogue. Hooks describes this realization as unlocking a locked door, leading her to see the classroom as a transformative place. Where teachers and students can confront the colonizing mindset and learn to construct and deconstruct identities in resistance. Freire's influence helped shape Hooks' vision of engaged pedagogy, where education becomes multicultural, democratic, and really a shared journey towards freedom. Liberation as citizen formation. So Bell Hooks' education is always for Hooks, education is always political. She reminds us that the classroom is never neutral. It either reinforces systems of domination or challenges them. And Hooks in this book redefines citizenship not simply as a legal identity, but as an active practice of participation in democratic life, grounded in awareness of systemic inequities. And she asserts that through teaching and dialogue, students begin to see how schooling has often excluded marginalized voices and how critical consciousness can prepare them to transform the world they live in. Hooks also believed that theory and writing could be tools of liberation, but only if we ask them to be. And so she wrote, theory is not inherently healing, liberatory, or revolutionary. It fulfills this function only when we direct it toward that end. And even her writing style was a political choice. First, with her name being lowercase, and then also when she rejected academic jargon to make her work accessible. So she said, my decisions about writing style are political decisions motivated by the desire to be inclusive. And that is what makes her so special and this book so powerful. This is how Hooks models what it means to teach and write for freedom, to use education as a site for forming critically aware, engaged citizens capable of imagining a more just world. Feminism and identity and education. So for Bell Hooks, feminism and education are inseparable. And she teaches that identity is never singular. It's shaped by the intersections of race, class, gender, and sexuality. The classroom then for Hooks becomes a space where students can uncover how these social forces shape their lives. She promotes dialogue, open dialogue, and teachers and learners who can begin to see how schooling can either reinforce or resist systems of inequality. Her idea of engaged pedagogy challenges teachers to center marginalized voices and to invite students to bring their whole selves into the classroom. Rather than asking us to leave our identity at the door as students, she views personal experience as a valid source of knowledge, something that deepens rather than distracts from learning. She also points out that many who call for diversity, quote unquote, fail to realize what it demands of them. And in her words, the politically progressive clamor is for diversity, but there is little understanding of how feminist scholars must change how we see, talk, and think to speak to truly diverse audiences. So Hooks believed that teaching across difference requires more than just good intentions. It requires new ways of listening, new languages of connection, and a willingness to transform ourselves in the process. Bell Hooks invites both teachers and students to look critically at the university as a system of power. So, positionality within the university system. She reminds us that higher education often privileges certain voices while excluding others, and that awareness of this imbalance is the first step toward change. She calls on students to confront their own positionalities, to ask whether they are benefiting from institutional hierarchies or working to resist them. And for her in this book, Especially, the classroom is not separate from society. It reflects the same struggles over power, access, and voice. For Hooks, language plays a key role in that struggle, and she writes, "When I hear standard English, I always hear the sound of slaughter and conquest." And this is a reflection, a reflection that challenges us to see how even language carries the history of colonization and exclusion. And even so, Hooks also insists that within these same structures lies the potential for agency and transformation. As she writes that her own disinvestment in the notion of the professor as identity, it made her more willing to question her role as an educator. So in this way, Hooks models in this book what it means to teach from a place of humility, recognizing that the university and the university system, it is a site of oppression and a space of possibility. Passion and pedagogical practices that support reflection. So Hooks ends her book here, um, re um, re reintroducing or completing the idea that passion is not separate from learning. It's at the very heart of education as the practice of freedom. And this is what she calls engaged pedagogy. So she models a teaching style that weaves together personal narrative, theory, and critical dialogue. Her classrooms invite students to connect their own lived experiences with broader systems of power, making learning both intellectual and deeply personal. And at the center of Teaching to Transgress is Hook's philosophy of dialogue and community. So she believes that open conversation allows students to see that identity is rational, not isolated, that who we are becomes clearer through our connections with others. And this starts with reflection and in the classroom. She also acknowledges in this book that this kind of vulnerability can feel uncomfortable for educators trained to maintain control. And she writes, "There's not much passionate teaching or learning taking place in higher education today. Even when students are yearning to be touched by knowledge, professors fear this challenge." And as a teacher, well, as a TA, I have experienced both the yearning to be touched by knowledge and the a fear of being challenged by being too vulnerable in the classroom. That's one reason why I love this book. So for Hooks, reclaiming passion in teaching, it means letting go of this fear, creating classrooms where curiosity, care, and reflection can flourish and empower. And it's through this emotional honesty that she reminds us in this book, Teaching to Transgress, that both leaders and students are able to be transformed. Now I have some questions that will help us to more deeply consider this book. So I have the quotes and the question here. Question 1, in what ways might we unintentionally reproduce the same patterns of silencing and anti-intellectualism within our own classrooms or communities? 2, based on this quote I have for you, what might a holistic model of learning look like in practice? And what barriers, personal, institutional, or cultural, might prevent that model from happening? And the last one is, how might educators and institutions create learning spaces where standard English is not treated as the highest form of achievement, but as one of many tools for self-actualization and expression? All right, thank you so much.